In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos post-game reaction podcast brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. Ben Grant, along with JB, as always, as the Toronto Argonauts take down the Montreal Alouettes 34-27, and the Argos are off to the Grey Cup. Initial reaction, JB.
Yeah, fantastic game. Really great performance by the offense. Defense bended but didn't break enough for Montreal.
They broke a few times.
Yeah, not enough. Like a few cracks, but never totally broke. Great crowd, freezing cold, but you could tell the players were really jacked by like how into it was. Like it was as I thought it would be. It was the best Argos crowd in years.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a "Go Argos, Go" chant that I think caught the players by surprise.
Yeah, it was electric. The energy was something. It took a while for everyone to get in. It didn't really fill up until I feel like the end of the first quarter. Finally, everyone had made it to their seats. It was not easy getting down there today. But yeah, what a crowd. The atmosphere, the environment. And the thing is, it would be amazing if it were like that every game. And you wish it could. And hopefully some of these people that came today remember this experience and,
I want to say
sign
to
up for
all
tickets.
those people, like, it's really way better in August.
Yeah,
like, it was
know,
so cold
nice
today. And, like, the wind is whipping your face. And, like, it's way, way better in August. I just can't tell you how much better it is. But, God love them for showing up. It made a difference. It was, I think it probably made a difference in the game. The way that game could have gone either way. But I think the quick start by the Argos was really fed. I think those guys absolutely fed off the first real crowd of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I've seen, and it's hard to tell because how much of that is also, it is an East final, and so guys are pretty jacked up anyway, but there was an electricity on the sideline, like looking at the Argos bench, that I haven't seen to that degree before. And there was a lot of interacting with the crowd too, guys when they were off, and especially guys that weren't in too. You saw players like Shane Richards, for example, was up on his feet, facing the crowd, getting them cheering, getting them making noise during defensive possessions and things like that. There was so much more fan interaction from the bench. They certainly noticed it, and it seemed to be contagious. It sort of the energy from the fans poured onto the field and impacted the players. Let's go through some of the elements from this game. There's so much. I've got so many notes here that I want to talk about and things we'll get to. We'll of course go through some of the stats and plays of the game, players of the game, all that stuff as we work our way through. We'll start chronologically and then sort of see where it goes from there. Let's start with the wind, because it was one of the first things I noticed when we sat down. Wind coming from the north, which I think is only done one other time this season. One of the nice things about BMO is that it usually, if you're going to get any kind of breeze, it is straight in one direction. It is either north or south. The way the stadium's constructed, you don't get weird crosswinds that really ruin games sometimes. This wind was a factor, but it wasn't to the degree where we've seen it before, especially in games in Hamilton where it completely shuts down the one team's offense for a quarter. It wasn't like that today, but it did impact the game in certain areas, certainly in early stages in the kicking game, and even with the coin flip, for example. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, it impacted the game in terms of me wanting to throw my cup of hot chocolate onto the field to begin the second half.
Well, and for friends that don't know what happened there, because I did have a few questions about that on Twitter. So the Argos won the toss. They elected to defer, and so Montreal chose to take the ball, and the Argos chose to take the wind in the second quarter, which is the longer quarter, because the last 3 minutes of both the second and fourth quarter stretch the game out, and you end up with having like a dozen more or half a dozen more snaps in the second and fourth quarters. And so come second half, the Argos now it is their choice, and typically what teams do here is they take the ball. But what the Argos did is deferred in the second half, so Montreal took the ball again. That's why Montreal started both the first and third quarters returning the football. I think that was a good call, and I'll expand on that after you rant for a little bit, JB. You clearly did not think that was a good call.
It was not a good call. The wind was gusty, I will grant you that. But it was, we've had this conversation before, it was nowhere near play affecting. And you could tell in the fourth quarter, Montreal didn't have any problem moving the ball at all in the air. It at no point was kick affecting or throwing affecting. It was just cold and miserable. I couldn't believe they were giving up an opportunity to start that second half, put a dagger in Montreal, put that fire out that Montreal had started at the end of the first half, but instead decided to give Montreal a chance to keep that fire going, and Montreal did, and nearly took the game. The 55-yard run play right after they received the kick. So I'm gonna say no to that play. The wind was not nearly strong enough to be. For me, it's so rare that the wind is strong enough to give up getting the ball on the kickoff. Like, that is not a small thing to give up. I need game affecting wind, and it just was not game affecting. So I thought that was the wrong call that they escaped with by the skin of their teeth.
Here's why I like the call. So you start off by deferring, which they were going to do either way. So you defer, Montreal takes the ball in the first half. You now have time, and it's not like they had to decide right at that moment, and we're going to also kick in the second half. You wait and see what the situation is. And you get into halftime, the Argos at that point have an 11-point lead. And now you're saying this is a good scenario here, because they're going to be in a situation where in all likelihood, they're going to be trailing in the fourth quarter, and psychologically knowing you're down, knowing you're going to have to take chances you don't want to take, and you're going into the wind. And I know it wasn't a hurricane, but it was still wind. It did affect things. No. Trevor Harris, after the game, talked about how it did affect his deeper throws, that it was causing problems for him. And there were a couple balls that he had to throw differently or throw to different places. Maybe. So it did. Like, the players were aware of it. And not only that, the kickers are aware of it too. You could see in pregame warmup, watching them kick, they had an extra 5 to 10 yards going one way than they did another way. So with that 11-point lead, they have the luxury of not needing the ball first in that third quarter, and so you take the win in the fourth. I think it's a good call. If it's a tie game there, it's going differently. Maybe you think about it in a different way, but with that 11-point lead, the defense, hadn't been amazing, but all season long they've been a pretty strong defense. Yeah. You have to think with a running third quarter, you can get to the fourth with the lead, and they did. It
was a gamble. Don't forget they gave up 8 points in like 30 seconds to start the second half. At no point is that a good strategy.
Well, yes, and they did, and we'll get to.
So their strategy didn't work. They just got lucky.
But their strategy, they got unlucky is what happened, because Montreal had the wind in the third, but they scored on a 50-yard run play.
They gave up 8 points in 35 seconds to Montreal, and then they were able to to fix that mistake. But anyways, I digress.
So let's go through the actual gameplay now that we've talked about the coin for 10 minutes. First of all, let's talk about Chandler Worthy, because clearly Chandler Worthy was in Toronto's head to start the game, and I thought it became less of an issue as they went forward. But those first few kicks, you started with a pooch kick to open the game, which I actually liked. I thought that was executed really well. It came down about the 35. And remember, there's no halo on kickoffs. He barely had time to field it. He didn't really get anywhere in the return. And I would have been happy if they'd executed every kickoff like that all day. But that kick certainly was different because it was Chandler Worthy. But then it caused problems later. They had a punt which netted 4 yards after a penalty because it went out of bounds. They tried to sort of pooch another one later, and it didn't go well. Worthy was able to return it. And so, I don't know, were you in favor of this strategy of let's just not let Worthy burn us? Or would you have been more aggressive?
I was. I liked it. I liked the pooch kicks. I didn't like Haggerty's chance of being on the Grey Cup starting roster, but I did like the pooch kicks. I thought that was the way to play it. I thought that they did a nice job cornering a couple of the kicks. That made sense to me. You're giving up 10, 15 yards, but you'd be happy starting at the 35. You never had a momentum changing return, and the return team did a terrific job of coverage.
Yeah, Haggerty's day was not great. He had 2 punts, I believe 1 in each half. The first punt, I believe, traveled 14 yards, and there was a penalty because it went out of bounds. And then the second punt was 40. Again, going into the wind, that is a thing. It's something that you have to think about. But that was crushing to a play where, you wonder even about going for it in that scenario. You wonder about throwing the challenge flag because it was coming off a play. That was the play where Banks was going out of bounds right before that. And you're thinking, well, should we use the challenge here? They decided not to. And let's talk about that in a second. But then they end up, it was such a momentum killing few minutes there where it looked like Banks made a spectacular catch on the sideline. They rule he didn't. It's not challenged. And then you punt the ball, netted 4 yards after the penalty. Actually, just looking at this. So,
and I do think, obviously McLeod was pretty in favor of a challenge there. And the coaches, to their credit, felt it wasn't challengeable and weren't going to be bullied into it. But I do think it did affect, because when they later had the challenge, which was not a better challenge, I felt like there was probably a feeling of how many times am I just going to overrule my offense? That you need to kind of have your offenses back. And I felt that kind of played into, I don't think they challenged the second one if they hadn't turned down the first one.
Yeah, I agree, and neither should have been challenged.
No,
and I tweeted both things.
Right. But how many times can you do that? Right, you have to. There's a psychological aspect too.
It is possible that on that Banks play, he did get a part of a knee or a foot down before he went out of bounds. It's possible, but you can't, even on the first view of the replay, you realize right away, well, there's no way this is getting overturned. Maybe he did, but we can't tell conclusively. So it's just not going to happen. And so he was correct in not throwing that challenge flag. And I really thought he was going to, because like you said, the McLeod, Bethel Thompson's jumping up and down, Banks is jumping up and down. The whole offense is like, throw the flag.
I know.
And he didn't.
Then they punted in reverse. It was not. Ugh. It was not. That could have been a game sinking moment. There were a couple of game sinking moments that somehow the Argos were able to drive by. Amazing.
And the second challenge, it's another one that, it's pass interference, but you've talked about this before with challenges. Yes, it's pass interference, but that happens on every single play. If you overrule that, then it means you have to rule in favor of overruling every non-PI call ever, which happens, 30 times
especially in the red
zone.
They're never going to throw a flag on handsy defense in the red zone. You just have to live with handsy defense.
Yeah, exactly. And so we haven't even really got to the game yet. Let's get into this a little bit here. Something I thought was interesting defensively, I was kind of looking at what Toronto was doing personnel-wise a lot in that opening quarter, because we had a kind of like a wealth of talent that Coach Dinwiddie hasn't had all season, with healthy bodies coming back. So I was interested to see what they did with Jonathan Jones, with how they played McManus, and we'll get to his injury in a moment too. And then on offense, what they did with Ouellette and Harris. And I thought in those first couple of drives, I was really impressed with how Coach Dinwiddie was managing personnel. So let's talk about the defense first. Interestingly, on second and long situations, Muamba was coming out. Now, in talking to him after the game, he said this was something that he and McManus were arranging on second and long. When they switched to that sort of 7 DB look that they like to go to, one of them would come out and they just sort of communicated as to who that would be. And on the first couple, it was Muamba. And I don't know if I like that situation for him. He takes away the middle of the field, because we saw a couple times on second and long, Harris hit 10-yard digs, which that's Muamba's specialty. You look at every pick Muamba has over the last couple of seasons, 10-yard digs and drag routes, he makes a difference in. And I thought by bringing him out, even though McManus is obviously a great player, bringing Muamba out opens up the middle of the field. So I think that was something I would rather they found a different solution for that. And maybe you take McManus out and leave Muamba out there, which I guess they could have done. But, what do you think of that look for second and long?
Yeah, I like it. I didn't want them really to rush the quarterback a ton. I would have had a little more heat in a few situations because I felt like they really were giving him enough time to make that read. But yeah, I mean that makes sense to me. I think in terms of Muamba coming out and giving up the middle of the field there to whomever, it that was their philosophy. I can't. I mean they gave up 28 points, but they won the day.
And that first defensive drive ends with a Montreal punt that goes into the end zone. And this was one of my favorite press conference moments because you've lived through this as a coach, as have I many times, where you see something happening on the field and it's like in slow motion and you start yelling things and that even feels like it's slow motion. No. Banks picks up the football in the end zone and it looks like he's going to take a knee. And then he sees some space and breaks to the outside. And Coach Dinwiddie said, as this is happening, he's like, no, don't take it out. Because in his view, he's like, give up the single, you get to the 40. That's huge. Now we're a couple first downs away from kicking a field goal. But fortunately, Banks was able to get it 31 yards out. Now, Coach Dinwiddie said he would still like it at the 40 to give up a point. But 31 yards is a pretty good return. I like that he took it out because I think... Banks is a smart player. If he sees I'm only going to get to the 4, he's not going to take that ball out. He would have gone down. He was waiting to see what materialized there, and he saw he basically had one-on-one with a backup linebacker, and so he took it, and he was able to almost break it. One more block, and he's gone there. So 31 yards, to me, those 9 yards, I would rather take the 31-yard line and not give up a point as opposed to give up a point and take it at the 40. And I feel like he made a smart call there. He would have gone down if it wasn't open.
Yeah, he had a terrific game. I mean, he's kind of been a bit of a comet this year where just some games he comes in and he's all world and then we don't see him again for 76 years. But he played amazing today. In the final, he was absolutely one of the key cogs of the offense.
He was, although he had two moments that I was really frustrated by. And so one was the catch that actually kept the drive alive, their first drive alive, that drive that ends in a touchdown. We'll break down how that happened in a moment. But a key play to that was a catch that he made off his foot. And the reason I'm frustrated by this is because it was a great ball. He had found space. I think it was a second and long situation. He'd found space down there. He was sitting by the sideline. Bethel Thompson gave him a great ball, chest high, and he turned to run before he caught it. And you've seen that so many times watching football games over the years. Receivers do this. And a veteran like him, he's got to know better just to catch it cleanly first. He already had the first down. He was trying to get into the end zone. He ends up making an amazing play. I don't know what it is with that corner of the field because that's the same area that he made that ridiculous touchdown catch against Winnipeg early in the season. Same kind of thing where how on earth did he end up coming out with this football? This was a lack of focus. He kind of hacky sacks it back up to himself as he's going to the ground and makes that catch. But while that's a great play and an amazing play, I'm also really frustrated by it, and I don't quite know how to justify that play in my head. And then you have the other play late in the game. But I guess it was the third quarter at that stage. And he's going out of bounds. He's wide open. Again, it's going to convert a second and long situation. But he allows his toe to get out of bounds. It was really close on the sideline, but as a veteran receiver, you just have to be better with your feet. He's got to hold his foot back. He had all sorts of space. There's no one near him. And so I expect better from a player like that. He caught it cleanly, but he had a toe out of bounds. And that, to me, it just has to be better. So he did have a good game. He had some really amazing moments.
Well,
but I was frustrated.
He'll
with
never
him.
be a technical receiver. That's just not. I just don't think that's his thing. To be honest, he makes great plays, but he is not like a kind of fundamental. He is not a fundamental player. Where look at Daniels, who is a professional receiver and would never make those mistakes. But Banks brings you this like alchemy. This like maybe something good, maybe something terrible, but when he is on, it adds a real energy to the offense that I don't know what to make of. It's almost pinball-esque.
Yeah, he has like Banks is like a die that only has a 6 and a 1 on it, right? Like you're rolling one of the two, but so it's going to be big either way, and that can be frustrating, but it can also be amazing.
Yeah, 100. But there's no doubt he still has game breaker in him.
It's like the sort of the offensive version of Chris Edwards.
Yeah, a little bit.
So that first touchdown is set up by a really nice play design. They got Harris and Ouellette on the field at the same time. Harris is in the backfield. Ouellette is the inside guy to the quad side out to Bethel Thompson's right. And I love everything about this play design. They play action to Harris. Harris is running from right to left, so away from the quads. Bethel Thompson pulls it and flips it out to Ouellette, and they have huge numbers because remember that Montreal was coming into this game with a small linebacking core. They didn't have Awe. They were going to be undersized in the middle, obviously worried about the power run game. And there you are on the first drive with heavy play action to Andrew Harris that completely sucked in all the backers. And now that left a huge numbers advantage to Toronto on the outside. And so that to me that's Coach Dinwiddie just making a really intelligent play design, knowing what Montreal was going to be, coming into this with. So that ends up going for 46 yards. Ouellette took that all the way down to the Montreal 17, and then a couple plays later, they're in the end zone. So to me, that was really nice play design by Coach Dinwiddie, well set up by him. Obviously, Ouellette had to do the actual running, and then you've got that Banks catch off the foot, and then Andrew Harris runs in the football from 6 yards out for his first touchdown as a Toronto Argonaut, and it comes in the Eastern Final.
Yeah, I think he was a little disappointed with how easy it was. I don't like.
It's true.
I don't know what happened there.
Him.
It looked like Montreal didn't get the call in, based on like the body language of the defenders, and they played like they didn't get the call in because they just ran in from 6 yards.
Yeah, no one came near him. I actually thought the play was blown dead because it looked like nobody moved on the Montreal side of the ball. And I'm anxious to rewatch a number of things from this game.
I don't think they got the call in. I think it was as simple as that. And I guess I guess they weren't really keen on like going to base.
Yeah, it was pretty odd and anticlimactic, I guess, in that sense. But
totally.
It's also
but great for him. But totally, I'm sure he felt like, "What? Come on, I want to fight a guy into the end zone. What's going on here?"
After all the contact he took inside the opponent's 10-yard line in the early stages of the season, you think of all those runs he had that were so close, where he got down to the 1 and had to break 6 tackles to do it. He finally gets one that is like touch football. So. Yeah, but what a huge first drive. And that was key for so many reasons. The biggest reason for me is that it chased away the ghosts that would have been hanging over the offense, over McLeod Bethel Thompson, had they settled for a field goal on that opening drive. Everyone in the stadium and everyone on that sideline, no matter how positive you are, would have been thinking, this is what happened last year. Remember when we kicked 16 field goals and couldn't get the ball in the end zone? It was huge for them to be able to open that first drive with a touchdown. Oh, and the other reason, even maybe even more important, is that we talked about how key it was for Toronto to get out in front, because you didn't want Montreal to be in a situation where they could just comfortably run the football for the entire second half. And so if you get out to an early lead, discourage them from doing that. But it kind of turned out not to be that kind of game. Montreal's running game, wasn't really working at all. It was their passing game. What do you make of when you look at some of these numbers for Montreal? Yes, they had a huge touchdown run from Stanback that went for 52 yards, but you take away those 52 yards, they basically had 40 yards rushing the entire day.
Yeah,
that's unexpected.
My takeaways were, one is Stanback is a huge man. When you see him on the field, like, oh, okay, I can see why he's such a hammer. He's a big dude, and I thought the defensive line and the linebackers did an amazing job not letting him going. Montreal came out, they had a lineman as their wing, which I thought was an interesting wrinkle in terms of clearly they were looking to do some power run out of that if you're going to put your extra lineman in at wing. But the power run just never materialized for them. The D line and the linebackers kept it in check, except for that one blown play. Montreal threw the ball at will, and I had said that before the game. I guess I didn't mean it quite so literally. I felt we had to shut down the run and live with the pass, and that's what they did. So I have to like their philosophy, because I felt that was 100%. You didn't want both, because that's what happened to Hamilton. They got killed by both. And we took away the run and just lived with Harris throwing the ball all over the field, and it just wasn't enough.
If you take away that 52-yard run, I'm just looking at the numbers here. Take away that 52-yard run, William Stanback had 11 carries for 32 yards in that case. And so you're basically talking about just over 3 yards a carry for one of the best backs in the CFL.
And Fletcher was a non-entity, and he won the Hamilton game single-handedly.
Yeah, Fletcher did nothing. He had 3 carries for 8 yards, didn't have a single reception. He's a killer. You talked about him being an X factor in our lead up to this game. You talked about him as being a guy that could really change the balance of power in this game, and I felt like that was completely a possibility. But yeah, they took him entirely out of that football game.
Yeah, I mean, we almost got done in by bloody Philpott. The defense took away the running game, and they took away Geno Lewis. That should be enough for a dominating win.
Yeah, Geno Lewis still had 83 yards, but 83 yards, no touchdowns. You'll take that against Lewis is the kind of game changer that can put up 3 touchdowns in a game. He can put up 150-yard games. And so to me, 5 catches for 83 yards, that's great. You'll take that.
Yards too.
Yeah, and he talked after the game so glowingly of Tyson Philpott. He actually mentioned in his press conference, he's like, I'd be surprised if this guy is not playing down south soon. Yeah, because he felt like Philpott was that kind of a receiver. He really did tear up the Argos DBs today. Now, is that a concern? The way that Philpott succeeded, and we talked about him maybe being like the sort of third option on offense, to have that kind of player put up big numbers like this. Philpott ends the day 8 catches for 127 and a touchdown. Does that concern you?
No, it doesn't. Harris is a highly accurate quarterback, probably the most accurate quarterback in the league. And the kid is great. You want a team's number 3 receiver to be their star. If you're a defense, like, you are basically saying, okay, if your number 3 guy is a star, then you win. And it almost happened. So I think this kid is a star, and he was being fed by a highly accurate quarterback. I don't think that's replicable, and I don't think we need to sell out the same degree for the run against Winnipeg or BC.
There were 3 Tyson Philpott catches that I kind of want to go through what the defense was doing on them. So one was early on. It was in the first quarter, and it led to Montreal's first points, their first field goal to bring it within 7-3. Philpott was going up the rail. He was in man coverage against Jamal Peters. And Peters seemed to actually be baiting Harris into the throw. He felt like he had good position. He was allowing he was allowing himself to kind of look beat, thinking that he could kind of catch up and use his length, which is, it's one of his biggest assets, is just he gets in the way. When he pins a receiver to the sideline, you just can't get it to him. And I guess he felt like he had really good positioning. He got Philpott off his stem a little bit. He was pressed to the sideline, and Harris just delivered a perfect ball. And you could see Peters ready to jump up for it. And he realized at the last second, I'm not going to get to it, because it was in a perfect spot where only Philpott could get to it with a jump. So he takes off into the air. Peters tackles him as soon as he catches it. But I think that was a pretty eye-opening moment for Jamal Peters to say, not only is this kid I'm covering an incredible athlete, but what an accurate pass down the sideline from Trevor Harris. And that's the last time I saw Jamal Peters play sort of loosely in man. They didn't run a lot of man today, but that was the only time I saw him pull that today. And then the other two big plays were seams where the Argos were hell-bent on stopping those receiver screens that Montreal just wants to run all day long. Toronto runs a lot of those too, but you could see Toronto's defense in their zone coverage, especially to the trip side. Their primary focus is, we are not going to let receiver screens out to that side go anywhere. And on both those seam routes where Philpott's like the number 3 receiver in that trips look, he's taken off up the seam, and you could see both times Argos DBs, who are responsible for either deep half or deep third, are eyes in the backfield watching the sort of screen action, watching the receiver screen action in the flats. And by the time they go to turn, it's too late. Philpott has already got space, and Harris is already in the midst of throwing the football. And so these are 30-yard plays. Each one of those is 30-yard plays. So you've got 90 yards of Philpott's 127 coming out of those 3 big plays, 1 up the sideline, 2 up the seam. I'm not worried about it, because I just don't see that. That's not pattern building to me. That's just one of those things where, the seams are because they're trying to defend something specific Montreal is doing. And they did. They shut those down pretty well. And then the other one is just Jamal Peters maybe not realizing the caliber of receiver and quarterback he was up against.
He hadn't put that on film, really. He wasn't a focus of their offense. And I do think they were probably a little surprised at how elite the number 3 receiver became. Like, that's a lot when your number 3 receiver is out there making those kinds of catches. That's like BC Lions in May, June kind of offense. We're like, well, I can't stop this. So I think they were probably a little surprised. And kid has a pedigree. Obviously, he's a first-round pick, and there's no reason to not believe he's not going to be a star. This was really a coming out for him.
Yeah, and it was just going all the way back to the combine. He had poor combine numbers, and it shows you how you should not really put too much stock in that, because he was a star in university. He was a star out in Calgary University, and he's turning into a star at this level too. So that shouldn't really surprise anybody. But yeah, like I said, you run a bad 40, and everyone's like, oh, he's not a real football player. It turns out he's actually quite fast and a pretty good receiver. So yeah, I'm excited to see him next year. But I would be even more excited if that's down south instead of in Montreal. Yeah. The second Argos touchdown, it came off of, there's a few points that I want to get to here. So the D-line was frustrating me early on, because they kept allowing Harris to extend plays. Like, Trevor Harris is not a terribly mobile guy. He's a lot like Bethel Thompson, where his running is usually not going to kill you. But if you let either one of these guys break the pocket and extend plays, bad things are going to happen to you on defense. And it seemed like every time Harris escaped the pocket, it was the D-line being just a little too aggressive, flying by him. He would roll out, and now there's trouble, because the Argos they're a very zone-heavy team. They're a cover 4 team. They play some cover 2. Either one of those coverages, after 5 seconds, there are going to be problems. They break down when the quarterback can escape, change the launch point, and now you're 4 or 5 seconds into the play. And every single time, he made them pay for it, whether he was finding Speaker or whether he was finding Lewis. And that was just driving me up the wall. So let's start with that, and then I'll get to sort of where that turned a little bit. But you're with me on that, right? The Argos just have to. They've got to contain and shut down.
I don't think contain was probably high on their priority list, because he hadn't really shown that to be a big part of him, like the way Caleros does. But for sure, contain would have been nice. I just think it wasn't what they were trying to do today. From a defensive line point of view, I think they really were selling out on that run, and would take his rollouts, which he hadn't shown really to be as deadly with as he was today.
And that's something they cannot let Zach Collaros do in the Grey Cup. And we don't know still, the game's being played as we're speaking here. It's, there's still time for anything to happen, but we're anticipating a Winnipeg win, as we have, since April, I believe, is when I predicted a Toronto-Winnipeg Grey Cup, JB. I believe you were on the Riders. How's that going?
Well, I mean, yeah, not well. I don't have anything. I have no response to that.
But yeah, he looked like Caleros today, the way that he was rolling out to his right and just finding ways to make plays. So that's something they do have to clean up, and that is a bit of a concern. But one place it didn't bite them was it happened again near the end of the first quarter. They go flying by Harris. He steps up. He actually crosses the line of scrimmage as he gets the ball out to Grant. And it's stripped by Peters. Peters makes up for that long ball he let up earlier. Grant catches the ball. Peters strips it from him. The Argos recover. They are able to decline that penalty, obviously. And then a few plays later, AJ Ouellette is in the end zone. It's a swing pass from MBT, and it's 14-3. That's the end of the first quarter. What a first quarter. It was exactly the way that you wanted that first quarter to go. If you're an Argo fan, if you're anyone on the Argo sideline as well, they knew we have to get out to an early lead. They went into that first quarter into the wind and come out of it 14-3 after a year of thinking about all those field goals. How they were able
to overcome the hurricane winds will be a story for another day.
Get out of here. It was windy, all right.
What a triumph of man over nature.
So into the second quarter, and the Argos open it up on a pretty interesting play. So it's 2nd down and 1. The Chad Kelly package comes in. Nobody goes out wide with Davaris Daniels, and Chad Kelly drops back, and it looks like a play from like Little Giants or something like that, where Davaris has just got no one with him. He's able to walk into the end zone. That was just soul crushing for the Alouettes. The Argos go up 21-3 at that point.
What? I mean, I just don't know. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, the Argos they've put that fake on tape. I mean, obviously, even if they hadn't, that's just sort of basic football, but they've had that on tape. I'm sure the special team coach is already, lying awake, staring at the roof of the bus, wondering about that play. All I can assume is, I'd have to rewatch it. Maybe Montreal was short a guy.
Yeah. So what actually happened there was on the previous play, Sutton was injured. And so Sutton, the halfback, he's the boundary side halfback, he came off, and there was confusion in their substitution package. And so when Toronto came out with their short yardage package, that's something where Sutton's usually out there on the field for that. There was a miscommunication in the D. Nobody went out there with Davaris. And I talked to Davaris after the game about this, because I know, having been in that same situation before, he was lined up wide, and I asked him how slow time felt like it was going from the moment that he broke the huddle and saw that nobody came with him to the moment when Chad Kelly snapped the ball. And yeah, he said it was crawling by, because he's just thinking, like, he said he was trying not to be noticed. He was just staying as still as he could out there on the sideline, hoping no one would look over and see, like, hey, there's a all-star receiver sitting over there on the sideline. And so, yeah, they snapped the ball. Now, he said they had a passing call anyway, and so it wasn't like a huge adjustment that Chad Kelly had to make, where he had to like check to something or decide not to sneak it and throw it instead, that they had a pass on. And so Chad Kelly, though, did spot him, which also, that also doesn't happen all the time too. Quarterbacking is really tough. And I've seen plays before where something like that happens. Nobody goes with a guy, and the quarterback doesn't notice it, and they carry through with whatever the play was and turn away a touchdown. And how annoyed would everyone have been if that was just a 1-yard sneak for a first down with Davaris Daniels completely uncovered. But yeah, good on Chad Kelly for spotting it. Good on Davaris for not giving it away and staying still as a statue. And then that's one of the hardest passes in the world to catch, too. When there's nobody near you, you know it's going in for a touchdown. Chad Kelly just lofts it up for him, and he walks it in 21-3 Argos. Now, the next thing to happen is the Wynton McManus injury. And this was a crushing moment because, and you could see it just in the players on the sideline, but even post-game, talking to Enoch Mwamba, he got emotional talking about losing Wynton McManus there. And he actually talked about how angry he was. That was the word he used, was angry, because he knows how hard Wynton worked to get back from the knee injury. And he looked fantastic. He only had a quarter of play before he got hurt, quarter and a bit. And man, he looked good out there. And to rehab your knee all the way back over these last 4 weeks, where I'm sure he did nothing but rehab morning, noon, and night. He gets out there, and they didn't know for sure. Coach Dinwiddie suggested he felt it was a torn bicep, which is probably going to be a season, almost certainly going to be a season-ending injury for him with one game to go. And it's just crushing to see something like that occur.
Yeah, it was amazing to have him back. I know the team fed off that for sure, and those opening drives, to have him and Mwamba shutting down the run, set the tone, for the day. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to be so excited about having an MVP return and then lose him to another injury. But from a franchise perspective, at least they've had a lot of games to get used to not having Wynton. So I think from a team perspective, they're prepared to play well without him. But I know he will be on the sidelines for sure with those guys.
Oh yeah, and he'll be an emotional part of the team.
Yeah,
over the next
he'll be
week.
great on the sidelines. I mean, having him as sort of a coach and a guy that people will listen to, I think is not nothing. I think that's going to be a big help.
And it looked like that second quarter, it just like McManus goes down, then Deshaun Amos goes down, Daniels goes down. It was just one after another after another. Priester went down as well. Like it looked like the wheels were falling off. Fortunately, most of those guys were able to come back. I know Jamal Peters also got hurt. And talking to Coach Dinwiddie after the game, he said that the McManus injury is the only one they're concerned about. The rest of the guys, they're going to be sore. It's going to be maybe a couple light days of practice this week in preparation for the Grey Cup, which that's not nothing either, but that they should be able to play. They're anticipating that it's only McManus who's not going to be able to dress and play in this Grey Cup game. So that part of it's good, but it looked thin for a moment when Amos went down and Priester went down. You're looking here and you're just like there aren't any more. Like, it's just Sutton. That's the only guy they've got left here. And so it looked to be a bad situation, but fortunately everybody was able to get back on the field. So the Argos go into halftime. They've got a 24-13 lead, and they make what seems to be controversial call to take the win in the fourth coming out. Stanback runs for that 52-yard play we talked about. It's now 24-21 after Philpott scores on the 2-point conversion. He was just wide open in what looked like a bust to me. And I still didn't feel, there was never any point in this game, once it got to 7-0, there was never a point in this game where I felt like the Argos weren't going to win this. It just didn't feel like that kind of thing to me. And maybe that wasn't the mood, just judging by Twitter, that was definitely not the mood on Twitter. Twitter was nervous, like you wouldn't believe, at 24-21. How did you feel?
I was nervous until I saw the drive that they responded with. I felt the first half was certainly as good a first half as McLeod has had. He looked comfortable. He looked confident. The offense looked like they had a game plan. There didn't seem to be any concerns. And when he came out and they immediately responded to what could have been a game-changing, turn of events, I felt very confident after that drive. After that drive, I felt like the offense was, as the defense had done a number of times this season, the offense were not going to let this game get lost.
I had a lot of people asking me what Enoch Mwamba was so upset about in the third quarter. There was a moment where he just got right in the officials' faces near the south end zone. And for a few plays in a row, he went back to talk to the same guys about it. And he was very animated. And that's not something you typically see from Enoch Mwamba. So I asked him about that after the game. And he just felt like there was some stuff that they should have been calling that they weren't. It looked to me like he got hit really late on one play. And I guess he probably interpreted that as well, obviously a late hit, but also kind of dirty. And he's like, you gotta call that. That can't be something that you let go.
I thought Montreal played chippy all day. And a couple of times, I mean, I couldn't believe there wasn't a flag. I'm like, the guys are getting punched in the head. I'm like, what is this? Are we playing penitentiary league, the longest yard? What is happening here? That's a flag. It's not just, well, come on, guys, stop punching each other in the head. But that seemed to be the referee philosophy was, come on, fellas. And I'm like, okay, and I thought it was a well refereed game. Largely, I thought they let them play, and no, there weren't that many ticky-tack calls. I was happy with the refereeing, but Montreal was definitely chippy. And then at the end, the referee was surrounded by like 8 Alouettes who were all screaming at him as loud as they could. I'm like, I'm sure Edwards was wondering, this isn't a flag?
It would have been for him.
They were screaming at the referee.
That was after the face mask, right?
Yeah, I'm like, what is happening here? I wanted Chris Edwards to come out and be like, what? Excuse me, Mr. Referee.
Yeah,
I would be suspended for this.
I think that referee is just like, this game is almost over. This yelling will stop soon and I can get out of here. But I couldn't believe there wasn't a flag on that.
I would have got laundry patrol right there. Would have been bang, bang, bang. Who else wants some?
So the third quarter, fourth quarter is where we saw the double moves. And Coach Dinwiddie likes to do this. He's done this all season long where he sets up plays. And they had been running, and maybe I should stop tweeting about this because I felt like this was coming, but they ran all hooks a number of times in the first half. And the reason you do that, well, one, it's open. Montreal's playing zone coverage. All hooks and a trips concept is great. You're always going to find an open guy in zone, but you're trying to set up the double move for when you do catch them biting. Just like how Montreal did with Toronto looking into the backfield for those receiver screens and turned it back on them with that seam route. At all levels of football, that's what coaches try and do. You spend the first half setting stuff up, and then you play off that in the second. And there were some opportunities here. They hit DeVaris Daniels in the third quarter with a really nice sort of double move off a fake screen. And then the second one that would have gone for a touchdown, this was now into the fourth quarter. It looked like the all hooks look. There was a pump fake from Bethel Thompson, and then DeVaris took off again, and they just couldn't quite connect. But DeVaris, he had him. The DB totally committed to stopping that hook or maybe trying to take it back for a pick six. And that's why you do it. That's why you do it off hooks, because it's so tempting for a DB. They can't resist it when they've seen it a few times, and they just couldn't connect on that. And that must have been so frustrating, because as a coach, you spend your time setting that up. You get the okay from the booth to be like, yeah, they're ready. They're set for it. You call it in the perfect situation. That was a 2nd and 5, a 5-yard hook, roll into the go, and they just couldn't quite connect on that. It's fortunate that wasn't a game breaker there, because that would have been one you think about in your dreams for the next 10 years.
I'd like to watch that one on replay too. I would say live, it looked like maybe, I don't know if Daniel thought he was getting the ball, but didn't look necessarily like there was 100% speed on that play, which is why the ball looks so overthrown. But I got to watch it again.
Yeah, I couldn't tell. It just looked like an overthrown ball to me, but I wasn't watching Daniels on that. And so I was watching the offensive line because there was some heat sent, and I was seeing how they picked it up. But let's just talk about the offensive line for a moment, because I think that kind of goes a little bit unnoticed in all the other things that were going on today. The offensive line played extremely well. They didn't give up a quarterback sack. There were only 2 hits that I saw Bethel Thompson take, one of which I thought was actually kind of late I feel like it was on the touchdown pass to Gittins Jr., which is the next thing we'll talk to.
Step late.
Yeah, and that probably should have been flagged, but what a job the offensive line did, not only in pass protection, but in creating lanes. Toronto had an effective run game. They had over 100 yards rushing, Bethel Thompson with 300 yards passing and didn't get sacked once, barely got touched legally in the entire game. So, yeah, tip of the hat to that whole offensive line unit.
Yeah, they're all very good, and I'm not just praising on Hunter, but Hunter really solidified it. Everybody is where they're supposed to be now, and now that they've had some time to get some more playing reps, they're only getting better as a group. I thought they played fantastic today, and I think that is the unnoticed but the most impressive takeaway from the game for me is how good that offensive line played. They played like an elite offensive line today. I know they're not road graders, but that's okay. They're still fine in the run and excellent in pass pro, and they played really, really well.
I thought it was by far the best game of the season for the offensive line. And here's why. Because not only do they have the numbers and the lack of sacks and everything else, but Montreal, it's not like they were just running base defense. There were a number of times where I thought, oh, here comes zero. And we've seen that over the last few weeks. They've been very aggressive with blitzes. And instead, it was some sort of exotic zone blitz that we haven't seen them run before, or they would just all bail out and just rush three. And we've seen communication issues earlier in the season come from that. And I think having 2 straight weeks where you can work on things that have been an issue, I think probably helped this offensive line unit more than anything else. And it allowed some of their guys to get healthy, like Philip Blake, who I don't know, but I have to imagine, he's feeling it after this long season. And I know John Allen has been hurt pretty much all year as well. And those guys, Blake playing out of position, Darius Bladek playing at an all-star caliber level. Justin Lawrence has been amazing. And then you, of course, mentioned Ryan Hutcher. All 5 of these guys, I'm hoping they were celebrated in the locker room today, because that unit should get a game ball after a game like this. Let's talk about that Curly Gittens Jr. touchdown catch. Have you ever seen a prettier pass delivered from McLeod Bethel Thompson on that seam route to Curly Gittens Jr.? Gittens had a step on his man, and Bethel Thompson, who isn't, if there's one flaw in Bethel Thompson's game, and there might be a couple small flaws in Bethel Thompson's game, as good as I think he is, every quarterback's got something that they still need to work on. His is probably the deep ball and, hitting open receivers on deep routes. Although I thought he put one on the money that Phillips dropped today, a corner route early on in the game. There was one that DeVaris, was it DeVaris that dropped one down the sideline?
At the end of the first half.
Yeah, that I thought was a beautiful ball too. He was on today with those deep throws, and this was just a gorgeous pass. And I want to also shout out Curly Gittens Jr. on this play, because while it was put in a perfect spot for him, I'm telling you, it is not without fear that you go after all out for a ball like that, knowing that you are a few mere feet from the uprights. And Gittens Jr. clearly didn't have that in his mind. He fully extended, caught the pass, rolled with it into the end zone. But like we saw with the Tommy Neal touchdown a few weeks ago now, running seams, up the hash marks like that, running post routes like Tommy Neal did, as you get close to that upright pole, you think about it, because this is not the same as running into a halfback. You were running into a solid metal pole.
I mean, you see offensive coordinators. I mean, that's not by accident. That is definitely an edge to be pushed, because you've got a natural or an unnatural pick. So offensive coordinators are definitely pushing that envelope. So, I hope everybody stays safe.
Yeah, it terrified me. As soon as that left Bethel Thompson's hand, I'm thinking, do not be at the upright, because Gittens is going to go after it. It's a playoff game. It's the Eastern Final. This is going to be a touchdown, and I couldn't, from my perspective in the press box, I can't quite gauge the depth there, so I couldn't tell how close he was going to get to it. But yeah, 100% focus.
I'd love to see more. I mean, I've been ranting about that or commenting intelligently, depending on your choice. I'd love to see more seam throws from Macbeth. He's got a gun, and I know we love those. He can throw the deep ball and he can throw the outs, but I'd love to see more of those worked in, because I think that's an aspect of his game that I think can really punish teams because he can put it on a laser when he is throwing between the hash marks.
And we get to the fourth quarter, and the fourth quarter, from a scoreboard point of view, is boring. Only 3 points are scored in the fourth quarter, and 3 by the Alouettes. But I want to highlight the job that Toronto did in this fourth quarter, which never happens in the CFL. You see so many possessions in the fourth quarter of a tight football game like this because it's just the way the clock works. You're inevitably going to have several shots at it. Like, how many times have you heard commentators talk about, yeah, there's only a minute 31 seconds remaining, but we could see there's enough time to run like 25 plays. It's true. The CFL fourth quarter takes forever, and you have chance after chance after chance. Today in the fourth quarter, Montreal had 2 possessions. They started right at the beginning of the fourth quarter with the football. They punted it away, and they weren't punting a lot today either, but they punted away at 11:44. Toronto puts together a time-consuming drive. They take up 4 minutes of clock time, punt it back to Montreal. Like half the punts of this game are in the fourth quarter. Montreal does put a field goal together there to bring it within 7. But there's 4:25 left on the clock when they score, and you're like, okay, well, Montreal obviously is going to get a few more cracks at this to try and tie this up. Toronto needs to put up a quick score, or just take some time off the clock. They ran it all off. All 4 minutes and 25 seconds get run off the clock as they just pound the football. It was run, 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 run. That is how the timeline leads. And then kneel down, end of game. That is an impressive display.
Yeah, I mean that's the two-headed monster. That's kind of the dream. And to of course, it's sweet to Montreal, the Alouettes, and to do a 4-minute drill was really impressive. The fact that they were able to never give them a shot. Like for sure, it was almost like an NFL ending. The way they just never gave the ball back. Really impressive by because and Montreal knows it's run. So you're not doing this in the middle of the game. I mean, they know run is coming, and to still be able to get yards, I think is a credit to that offensive line and Ouellette and Harris who worked beautifully together. I was really happy with how well they complemented each other.
Oh yeah. They played beautifully together today.
I thought the coaches did a really great job of. It felt like they've been a two-headed monster for all season.
Yeah, because that's the fear, is that you get to a situation like this, and sometimes it's almost like, well, I don't know which toy to play with. There's so many. It's Christmas morning, and you're like, I don't know what to do. And it never felt like that. Like Coach Dinwiddie clearly had a plan. He used both Ouellette and Harris as decoys in various different situations. He played off of tendencies. It was perfectly set up. This is, we talked about how this is probably the best game that McLeod Bethel-Thompson has ever played as a quarterback. Just given the stakes, the stage, the level of competition, the weather, everything else, that hurricane wind that you keep talking about, and this is the best game that McLeod Bethel-Thompson has played. And both Coach Dinwiddie said that after the game, and McLeod Bethel-Thompson agreed. And I think I have to say that too. But this might also be the best game Coach Dinwiddie has coached. He still threw an ill-advised challenge flag, which maybe that's just going to be his thing for his whole coaching career, but he coached a heck of a game today. Yeah,
they they really, if Philpott doesn't turn into the second coming of I don't know, Milt Stegall or something out there, they probably win going away.
It felt like it was going to be like that. It took Tyson Philpott playing out of his mind to keep Montreal in it, because I had predicted a 30-17 score in this game, and I really felt like that's what I got. It just, I didn't anticipate Tyson Philpott being Milt Stegall, like you said, and that was that was something that the Argos obviously weren't expecting either, because who would? But tip your hat to him too for an incredible game. And so the Argos win it. They hang on. They win by a touchdown, and man, that felt pretty good. The smile on the faces of the players, the coaches, the celebrations that we got to see little pieces of really show you what an emotional game this is, and also how tight that room is. It's not always like that with football teams, and it's not always been like that with Toronto Argonauts teams that we've seen in the past. This is a really close group of guys. Winning always helps that, but they were happy for each other as well as being happy for themselves. And they don't have that much time to celebrate. You celebrate tonight, and now tomorrow morning you're prepping for the Grey Cup. And I wouldn't be surprised if McLeod Bethel-Thompson's already in there watching film, getting himself ready, because these guys this is not far enough. This is not a team that's celebrating, yay, we got to the Grey Cup. Every one of them after the game, they're sitting next to the Eastern trophy. And the trophy is sort of symbolically like half a maple leaf, and sort of half because it's, you've got half the job done. We got there, but now the goal is obviously win the Grey Cup. And talking to some of those players after the game, guys that have been there, Enoch Mwamba hasn't been to the Grey Cup in 11 years. He was the one that brought that up, not me. And Coach Dinwiddie has quarterbacked in a Grey Cup. He's been to Grey Cups as a coach. These are guys that have won and have been there and have experienced that. There's a bunch of guys on this team that have, and getting there is not enough for any of these guys.
No, and it will be your Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Yeah, Winnipeg Blue Bombers are going to be the opponent here as the clocks are getting close to zero now. 28-20 looks like the Blue Bombers are gonna pull this one out. So the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, as I foresaw, we apparently didn't need to run this whole season if we'd all just listened to me back in April.
I wouldn't call it a profile in. Encouraged to choose the West and East winning teams from last year, but I think it was a perfectly logical choice that ended up.
I don't know, perfectly logical. Even like 2 weeks ago, everyone's like, "Well, Hamilton's obviously coming out of the East."
No, not that. I mean, we're not talking about those people.
Yes, that's true. All right, let's get to our players of the game, our plays of the game. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball. There's so many guys you can go with here. JB, who's your offensive player of the game?
Wow, bunch of choices. I want to shout out Ouellette. I thought he played fantastic. He was just a load, but I have to go Curly Gittens Jr. again. 9 for 9, 9 targets, 9 catches. Absolutely. Fought for every yard after he caught the ball. Very physical for a wide receiver. I thought really kind of fit the tone of the offense that they were going to be a physical team against Montreal, and he caught the winning touchdown. What more can you ask for from your receiver who's not your star receiver? So I thought Curly Gittens Jr. was unbelievable all day.
And he had a couple plays that I thought were like, they don't stand out as highlights, but like there was a 2nd and 6 that he converted in the fourth quarter to keep a drive alive, where he wasn't open. Murray was just draped all over him. Bethel-Thompson put it in a spot where his guy had a chance at it, and he just did so well to box Murray out, somehow catch that football, tight to his pads, and make that first down. And that led to a few more minutes being drained off the clock, and really made a difference. He was clutch all game long. He played like one of the guys you would expect to play like that, who had been to the Grey Cup year after year, who's been an all-star for 5 or 6 seasons straight. That was the level of play we got from Curly Gittens Jr. today. He was the best player on the football field.
He was. 9 for 9 is huge. That is such an accomplishment as a receiver.
Yeah, and almost 100 yards on that too, and of course the touchdown. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm going to go a different direction here just because I think we've got a lot of laurels to spread around. I will also tip my hat to AJ Ouellette. Great game with 38 yards rushing and 53 yards receiving, including that huge screen pass and touchdown reception in the first quarter. But I'm going to give my player of the game to McLeod Bethel-Thompson. He ends up with over 70% completions, and that's with a few drop balls. Really four of his incompletions that could have gone a different way. You've got or five. You got 3 drops. You got that foot out of bounds from Banks. You've got the sliding Banks that maybe he got his knee down in. He was accurate today. He could really have been 23 or 24 of 27 and still ends up over 70%, 300 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Heck of a day from him. He extended plays nicely, bought his guys time to get open. So yeah, that's my offensive player of the game. Where are you going on defense?
Well, I thought the defensive line played really, really well today. But I have to go Mwamba again. I thought he played unbelievable in that Montreal game, the one that mattered. And I thought he was all over the place in the first half today. Just absolutely stoning Stanback, which is no easy task. I thought he played really, really well, and they eliminated Montreal's running game, and I think he was a huge part of that. I thought he really has he's always good, but there's a gear he's had these last 2 games that's great to see. He's taking over games at linebacker.
And I agree with that. I thought he was probably the best player on defense today, but who was right on his tail was Dwayne Hendricks, who had a heck of a game. He was left one-on-one a lot today. They were paying a lot of attention to Sean Oakman. There were also pressure packages Toronto was dialing up, which left Hendricks one-on-one, and he won almost every single one of those matchups. He ended up with 6 tackles, which is unusual playing in the middle like that, especially in a CFL game. He had a sack, which was a massive sack. Those back-to-back sacks at the end of the second quarter were pretty big, and so him contributing in on that, I think earns him a defensive player of the game nod as well. And as much as looking at the rest of the players too, it's not like anyone played a bad game on defense. You look at the yardage that Trevor Harris put up and you're like, well, yeah, someone must have had a really off game, 362 and a touchdown, but it just didn't really feel like that. It was just more scheme based. I thought the defense played pretty well despite surrendering 27 points. I don't really know if there's fingers to point.
No, I think that was the plan. I think the plan was to take away the run and live with the pass, and that's exactly what happened.
All right, plays of the game. There are a ton here too. Some really obvious ones, some more obscure ones. What is your play of the game, JB?
I think building on what you were talking about, the 4-minute drive at the end. I think AJ Ouellette. They gave him 9. I would have some questions on that spot. I thought it was a full 10. When he ran for 9 yards and really kind of iced it, where didn't officially end the game, but I think emotionally Montreal knew that they were just hanging on now, and Toronto felt like the thing was over. And that was an amazing play to go get that. He was incredible in the 4-minute drive, but I thought that 9-yard run / 10-yard run for AJ was the play of the game to cinch it.
And for me, I'm going all the way back to the first quarter for a play that I love and hate, and yet I do think it might have been the play of the game. 2nd and 15 from the Montreal 22. Bethel-Thompson rifles it out to Brendan Banks, and we talked about this play. He drops it initially, hacky sacks it back up to himself, and catches it as he's rolling to the ground. First of all, great job on the officials for actually correctly ruling it a completed pass. But that play is big for so many reasons. I highlighted a few of them already. Well, I forgot to highlight the fact that Montreal was forced to use a challenge, and I think you have to challenge. That was such a huge play, even though we're only 5 minutes into the football game. That was a huge momentum swinging play, and so I do think Montreal's correct to challenge that, to throw that flag. But it was the correct call. Banks somehow was able to keep that alive. And then you don't have those ghosts hanging over your head. They're able to take it in for a touchdown. You convert an almost impossible 2nd down, especially in tight to the end zone like that. That was a massive play. And yes, I'm annoyed at Banks for taking his head off the ball and losing focus. But ultimately, he made the play. And that play in itself might have been the biggest play of the day. Well, that will just about do it for us, JB. We've got a Grey Cup week to prepare for. We've got hours of film to do. We'll obviously have a Grey Cup preview coming your way, so look out for that. And you've got to check out JB's report card, which will be posted shortly. The Argos are going to the Grey Cup in Regina after downing the Montreal Alouettes 34-27. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Together fight the foe, foe, foe.